Hey everybody, Brian here, back for the games I finished in March of 2020. I've got quite a few games I beat this month, so we'll get right started here. A lot of Genesis stuff, just to let you know. The first one to start off the month, uh, this is Landstalker, and this is a very beautiful game, one of the most beautiful games on a Genesis I've beaten so far. It is an isometric adventure slash role-playing game with a medieval setting. You're basically a treasure hunter who's in search of this king's treasure, and you go into this land, and there's all these people's problems you have to solve, and you go into dungeons, and in the dungeons are isometric. You have to navigate them, and it can be kind of tough at first until you get the hang of it, because you can't see behind certain things, so they hide stuff back there. You get to learn to go behind places you can't see in the current view, because you can't rotate it. There's no shadow for your character, so you don't. Judging distance takes a while to get used to, and I wasn't quite 100% used to it. But it's nothing. You might die a few times, but the penalty for death isn't too bad. They always start you in the right where you're at, I believe, and you get these things called magical herbs that heal you if you die, and enemies drop them, and you have this fairy companion that when you die, you automatically use one of those. She automatically uses one of those and fills up your life. So there's also these. The combat is just straight slashing for your attack button. There are better weapons to get. You get better swords, better armor, which is an imperative to get so you take less damage. And as you find more life vessels, they call them, I think. You get more hearts, like in Zelda, you get hearts. And I think the big heart is worth 10, and the little hearts are worth 1, and you eventually get like 3 big ones or 4 big ones and then 9 small ones. So what is that, 40, 50 some life. And I think it's actually in the 70s. No, you get more than that. I forget what I ended up with, but I had, as you get farther in the game, you get stronger, you take less damage, and you get more health. It gets significantly easier, but the early going's harder. I mentioned it's a very beautiful game, and it is a very stellar-looking game. This was made by the people who made the Shining series. They went on to make this game, Shining Force, Shining in the Darkness. And I talked about Shining the Holy Ark for the Saturn last time, and I really liked that game. And this is very good. It's very challenging at first, but stick with it if you enjoy it, and you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Yeah, I think I was looking at the instruction manual to see if there's anything I wanted to show of it, but there's not really. So yeah, it's worth playing, and you can get it on like a lot of these classic collections for, I think, PS3, Xbox 360, and there's a new one out for the new consoles, PS4, Switch. I don't know if it's on there or not, but give it a shot. It's not too long of a game. It took me like 20 some hours to finish. Let's see, did I get stuck? I think I might have didn't really get stuck anywhere. I think near the end, I think, if I recall correctly, there was one part where I had to look up, where you had to fall in the last dungeon to get on a certain platform. So I think I looked up that. But you can it's nothing too obtuse. So yeah, it's worth playing. Next up, The Great Circus Mystery, starring Mickey and Minnie Mouse. The Magical Quest, starring Mickey Mouse, was an early Super Nintendo game that I have very fond memories of. This is the sequel to that. Instead of playing as only Mickey, like in the first one, you can play as Minnie as well. And there's basically a circus level at the beginning, and introduces you to the mechanics. That are pretty much the same as the first game. And I think the Circus Mystery had the story. I can't remember. I think there's like an evil circus that comes to town or something. I could be confusing that with another game that I played this month, but it looks very, very beautiful, just like the first game. Some of the charm isn't as much as there because I played Magical Quest first, and then that was such a beautiful game, I remember. And this is still beautiful. Had I played, I think whichever one you play first is the one you'll remember, because it's very much like Magical Quest. There's 3 difficulties. I think I went through on easy and beat it. I would like to play through it again on normal and beat the game. Nothing too challenging, so if you're up for it, just put it on easy and you can get through it. Penalty for death, you get unlimited continues, so it's nothing too bad. And the costumes are different. You get like a, I want to say like a tree climber outfit this time. And I can't remember the other outfits because it was only this month and I forget a lot about it. So yeah, a lot like the first Magical Quest, just the sequel. And there was a 3rd Magical Quest for the Super Famicom where you play as Donald Duck and Mickey. That did not come out for the Super Nintendo here, but it did come out for the Game Boy Advance, which I want to play. I have it, I just have to play it. So yeah, that's a great Circus Mystery. It's also out on the Sega Genesis if you have a Genesis. And it's not an expensive game. I see it in used game shops for like $10. A game I always wanted to play. I played a little bit of it, and I never really got into it too much, but I like the look of it and the sound of it, and that's Plock. I knew if I gave it more of a shot, I would really like it, and I ended up really, really liking it. One of the more challenging games on the Super Nintendo. I mean, there's a lot of challenging games on Super Nintendo, but this is very challenging due to lack of passwords, and continues are very at a limit. So to beat this game, I had to leave it on for like a whole week straight, just so I wouldn't lose my progress. The way it works is if you beat four levels in a row, you get to continue. If you die during any point, you don't get a letter, so you don't get to continue. There are extra lives you can get by getting extra like these collectibles. I forget what they are, and you want to do that. Collect as many as you want because this game is hard. It starts out relatively easy, and once you get to about the 3rd main area, it starts to really ramp up in difficulty. And then near the end, the last part is when I really had to leave my. Up until then, you can really go through it without worrying about lives and such. But once it hits those later levels, it gets really challenging. The last gauntlet in particular is called the Flea Pit, and it introduces mechanics of different vehicles you ride. So you never introduced them before, and you have to learn these mechanics in one level, and there's about 6 or 7 levels till the last boss. And if you're not, don't leave your system on, or you just die, you run out of lives, and you have to start over again. So you really have to, because the way it works while you leave your system on is, you can, I shouldn't say you don't have unlimited continues, let me rephrase that. You can continue as long as your system is on. If your system is on, the power to the RAM is kept. So if you reset it, it's fine. But if you power off the system, you're going to lose your progress. So if you run out of lives, you can continue, but it'll set you back to your last main area. So you don't have to go through the whole game again. You just have to beat like 2 or 3, 4 stages to get back to where you were. But if you power off the game and turn it back on, you have to start the game over. So very volatile in that sense. A lot of games were like that. And getting up to the last level, I really did want to go through that again, so I just let my system on all week and finally beat it. And when I beat it, it was such an accomplishment because the last boss is very challenging. I think I had to look up the pattern. It was nothing I couldn't figure out on my own once I looked it up, but I didn't want to play those whole levels again because I'd had to play like 10 levels to get to the final boss again just to try it and try it and try it and try it. So I just looked up the pattern and then went from there and beat it. And yeah, it's a very gorgeous looking game, very colorful. The character has almost like Rayman. His legs aren't attached, or his arms. You can throw them. You can throw your arms left, right, and then feet, and then they come back to you. But if you lose them, then you're just your torso jumping around, and you have to go to a hangar to get them again. There's vehicles, like I said, to ride. There's like a helicopter near the end level, or like a motorcycle. And you have like a spin jump with A that makes you jump much higher. You want to get used to doing that, and a regular jump, and then an attack with Y, and jump with B. And the music is a standout of this game. If you play the game and it's kind of too hard, which I understand, play a few levels, get as far as you can, and if you don't want to leave your system on overnight like I did, or for a whole week, I would recommend just play a few levels, get the look of it, and then listen to the soundtrack, because the soundtrack and the graphics are the highlights of this game. And it is very, well, I shouldn't say that, because it is a very fun game. I couldn't stop playing it once I started playing it. I wanted to finish it. It's a very unique platformer. I think it's only on Super Nintendo during that era. It's not very expensive, so you can pick it up pretty cheap. Just be aware it's very challenging. Next up is Psychonauts. This is a Xbox came out on Xbox first, and I think, what's it say on here? What year? 2005, by Double Fine, which was Tim Schafer, who did a lot of point-and-click adventure games for LucasArts. He started a new company called Double Fine. This was an Xbox exclusive, like I said, for a while. Then it eventually came out on PlayStation 2, PC, and GameCube. This is a 3D platformer, unlike his other works, which was point and clicks. It's a very good one. The thing that makes this special is you're a psychonaut, which means like a child who has psychic abilities, and you go to a camp. You sneak into a camp with other people, like a summer camp of other students who have psychic abilities, and they're being trained by psychonauts, who are people's like magicians who can use their mind to do powers. So they can really go into different worlds in this game of different like crazy scenery and ideas. The worlds in this game are in people's heads. You get this once you get through the tutorial part, which is the first few hours of the game. You get the ability to throw this like psychic door on people's heads and go inside their minds, and the level is inside their minds, and it's part of their personality, of what they're feeling. You collect like access baggage, which is like these little bags that people have, and there's a lot of collectibles in that sense. You also collect like fragments of memories that are like these little images that you collect. The story is really cool. The characters are really cool. Not my favorite 3D platformer, but it's very good. The Xbox has a problem with the black and white button, only having 2 shoulder buttons, and the black and white buttons are in a weird position that you have to use your psychic powers for. So it's not as, the control to switch psychic powers and use them isn't as great as if you had like an extra shoulder button to use them. But other than that, it's a very good-looking game, very fun. It controls very well, and certain levels in this game are very, I remember them still, like the Milkman level where you go in this milkman's head, and it's just like this old 1950s town, and it looks very cool. There's also this like really like excuse me, the other professor has like this dancing party going on that you go into, and there's like this one where you're like this giant Godzilla creature going in the city. Very cool. About a pretty beefy game. It took me about 30 hours to beat, and because I went really slow, and there's even more to do. I was reading that at the beginning of the game at the camp, you can like talk to more people, and they have all their own stories that you can miss. But I found this game very fun, and it's on PC, Xbox, GameCube, and PS2 as well. As it might have been remastered, I'm not sure. For Xbox, I beat Suffering, The Ties That Bind. This is a third-person action game with survival horror elements. It's kind of a horror game of a guy who's in prison. He apparently killed his whole family, but he find out that he didn't really. I don't quite understand the story, um, so I can't really explain it. But there's these creatures in the prison. Like something happens in a prison, all these creatures take over, and you go through and you just shoot lots of demon-looking creatures, different weapons. I can't remember much about it, but it was enjoyable. There's a sequel for it, which I want to play, but after beating it, I didn't want to jump right into the sequel because I mean, this is nothing great, but it's pretty good. It's like average. Kind of some spooky scenes in it too. And the sequel, I think, is more like in a city. This was in a prison and like the grounds around it, so it was kind of cool. I don't know. Sometimes bigger isn't better, so I'm curious when I play the sequel if like most of what I liked about this game was just the setting. If they move away from that, I won't like it as much. But that's The Suffering, and yeah, I do have the manual there. I didn't know. I think the second one I don't have the manual. Next up, I beat Gargoyles on the Genesis. This is a late Genesis release. Pre-played, $6.99. Previewed. This was a rental from Blockbuster Video. Here, when November 1998. So late. This was in. I know it was a late release because I remember seeing it in GamePro. Let's see if I can see a date here. 19. No date I could see. I think it was 94, something around there. But Buena Vista Entertainment. First impressions of this game was it looks great. It has that kind of Aladdin kind of look where everything's hand drawn and it moves in a very particular way. But you got to kind of wait for the animation, so it's very hard to control until you get the hang of it. For that reason, I only beat it on easy, and that was a challenge. That took me a while to beat it on easy. The thing that's great about this game is the look of it and the playing of it. You can climb walls as Goliath. If you're not familiar with the show, I've seen 1 or 2 episodes, so I'm not too familiar. He plays a gargoyle, Goliath, and the story in this game is you wake up in the Middle Ages and eventually move to like. Once you beat that level, you turn into a statue. You go back to New York somehow. Excuse me, and then you go from there. The bosses are. One knock about this game is the bosses, if you don't know certain tricks against them, they're very hard. Like the second boss, you have to just run up to him and hit him, and there's a certain, you gotta wait for the next button, press and hit him, hit him, hit him. And once you do that, it's easy. But if you were to try to face him legit, just hitting him and run away, he'd be very, very hard. So the bosses on this game, until you learn their quirks, are very difficult. The stages are very fun to maneuver through. It's not a long game. Each time I got better and better so I could go through it quicker. The last stage is very tough. There's these like, it's in a smelting plant, like a steelworks, and you have to climb on these, the things that carry iron ore, and they dip them, like hot big things that are on like cranes that dip iron ore. You have to climb those, and it's auto-scrolling for this level, and you have to go underneath it and to the left and to the right to get all the way around this long, long maze. It's very tough. It was one of the more frustrating parts on this game. It was once I learned where the extra lives were and to get extra continues, it became much more manageable. I don't know if I'll ever beat this game on normal, or do I want to beat it on normal, because easy is hard, very hard enough. And the game is fun to play. I really do enjoy it. And it kind of makes me want to watch the cartoon series more. I didn't watch a lot of it. It's in this later Genesis releases were just in cardboard like this. I think Comic Zone was like that. I have Sonic and Knuckles like that. Light Crusader, Ooze, Vector Man. I don't know if all of them were like this, but I can't remember them all being like this sliding type. I don't remember. Next up, this is a game I wanted to beat for a while, and it was always so challenging for me. I get discouraged until I learned how to play it. I sat down and really learned how to play it, and it became one of my more, not favorite, no, let me rephrase that. I should be saying I'm glad I stuck with it because I really do enjoy it. And that's Aladdin on the Genesis. And as you know, Aladdin is like something like the first or second best-selling Genesis game of all time, behind Sonic or Sonic 2, I believe. Um, very renowned at the time when it came out in 1990. Is there a date on here? 93. Even the guys at id Software, I have a video of when they were developing Doom or something, or they were developing stuff there. Aladdin had just come out and they were playing it and they were amazed at the graphics, and that's what I remember about this game. At the time, it was one of the most beautiful looking games I've ever seen, or people have seen, because it was hand animated by Disney animators and like imported, compressed, mind you, but put in the game. And it still to this day looks very, very striking. And it was hard for me because you want, on this game you want to get extra lives and extra continues as much as you can, and you want to win the extra continues on the bonus screen, which means you want to find the genie extra, bonus tokens to get extra continues and extra lives. If you don't do that, it's very hard to go through. But I think the last boss is very disappointing because a lot of these games that are motion captured, like mentioned Gargoyles and Aladdin, you have to do things in a certain way, I found. And like I said, the bosses in Gargoyles, you have to do things in a certain way. The last boss on this is kind of disappointing. It's Jafari, and he turns into a snake. But you have to throw apples from a distance and often off the screen to get enough time to jump over his fire. And it's kind of disappointing because you're fighting this thing you never see. So that last boss fight was disappointing. The genie level was cool. All the levels in this game were very cool. The sound was great. I kind of want to replay this again. It's a very, very good game. And second of the shiny, but I should say shiny. David Perry, I think, who produced this, went on to go into Shiny Entertainment, and they did I think Cool Spot, which is very much similar. If you played Cool Spot, this has the same things going for it. Where until you see what you can jump on and not, it's not clearly defined to you. You might die, especially in the lava area. There's parts where I didn't know, much trial and error. I didn't know you could jump on there. I didn't know I was supposed to jump on there. But once you learn it, it becomes very, very fun. So yeah, Aladdin. If it's kind of too hard for you, stick with it, and at least until you get tired of it. But this, luckily enough, it was hard, but I wanted to finish it, so I kept playing it. I think this was released on the Aladdin collection this year. It had like Aladdin for this and Game Gear, weirdly enough, and then Lion King on it. The Super Nintendo one I beat, and I really like it too. I like them both. I know a lot of people pick sides of which is better. I think they're both good, and like whichever one you like better. The Super Nintendo one is easier, and it's more of feels like a Super Nintendo game, like a platformer. It's very acrobatic focused, and you jump on platforms and poles and stuff. This one has jumping, but not nearly as acrobatic and enough. It's more like you have a sword, and it's more basic platforming. The challenge from this is just where to go and avoid the pitfalls and stuff like that. Where the challenge in the Super Nintendo one is things are clearly well defined where you want to go, and the challenge in that one is just doing the jumps. So they're both good. If you can play this one, play it. If you can play the Super Nintendo one, play them. They're both great. This game became one of my favorite platformers on the Genesis that I beat. Let's see, I haven't beaten a lot of Genesis games, but of the ones I've beaten, this is one of the favorites. I put it above Aladdin, just because no, I shouldn't say that. I still think Aladdin is better because it's more, as much as Aladdin was hard, this was really, really much harder. Um, but I think Aladdin's one I would want to go through and play more recently, more again sooner than this one. And that's High Seas Havoc. I never heard of this game. What time? When did this come out? 1993. I don't even remember hearing about this game. And then as when I play these games, I like to go. I still have like game magazines, like my Game Pro magazines. So I'll look up the date this was released, and I'll look in Game Pro around that time. And I did see ads for this, but I don't remember ever seeing them as a kid or remembering them. Probably because I didn't have a Genesis, so I missed out on a lot of games. This is a platform game by Data East. It was also an arcade game. You're this. Is he a seal? What is he? I don't know what he is, actually. I forget. But I forget the story, but it's like a platformer mascot game. You run like Sonic real fast, almost like Sonic, but not nearly as fast. I don't want to compare it to Sonic because it has a lot going for it. And you have like a normal jump. You can jump on enemies, and then you have this little. If you jump again in the air, you'll do a kick, and you can kick enemies coming at you. That takes a little while to get used to. The game is about how many levels? There's a lot of levels. It's not too long, but they're very challenging game. This is one I had to leave on again a few days to beat it, especially the last boss. The last boss in this game, everything up until that point was very manageable. Had I not left my system overnight, I don't know how I would have beat this game. Because the last boss of this game and the penultimate boss before the last boss was tough. But this last boss was very, very tough. It took me at least 30 tries, I think, maybe more, until I learned the pattern and how to beat him. He was insanely tough. And the one before that was tough, but not nearly as tough. The music in this game is outstanding. And the graphics, it's a very colorful, fun game. It's a fun game to play. A little too challenging, but because there's no... You can continue as much as you want. Unlimited continues, which is... I love when games do that, because I'll just play them and play them. I'll leave my system on, like I said, forever until I beat them. I'm glad I got this game and I beat it, because it's very, very good. Check it out if you can. Hasn't been released, and it's kind of pricey now. But you can emulate it, see if it, and even playing the first 6 or so, not 6, but there's only like 6 or 7 levels, but the first 2 or 3 levels is worth it. Another game, I've had this game for a while, and actually never played it. I don't even think I popped it in to test it. That's World of Illusion, starring Mickey and Donald. This is a follow-up to Castle of Illusion, which I beat this year, which I liked. It wasn't anything special, I didn't feel like, but that's because I didn't play it when it came out. Had I played it when it came out, it was a very early Genesis release. It would have been amazing. This is the follow-up to that. It's much... it like begins off where Mickey and Donald are doing a magic show, and they get sucked into this door, this world, and you have to go through the world. There's cool levels in this game. There's like a giant library you go into. There's like you're jumping on tree leaves. It's a lot like the first one, only the cool thing about this is you can play as Mickey, and the stages are a little different, and he plays Donald, and the stages are a little different. So I beat it both with both Mickey and Donald. And if you play 2-player, which I haven't done it, it's like a co-op game where you have to use their special powers to complete the level. So I'm curious to see how different that is, because they must have redesigned the stages to take into account that you need to use the other person for the 2-player mode. So I'll be curious about that. Very forgiving game. It's a very good game for somebody who's new to platformers, because it's not too challenging. It's still enough challenge to, like, I died a few times, continued, but it's nothing that like compared to the other 2 games I talked about. This is really, really easy, but very fun, and it looks gorgeous too. I'm not sure if it was ever released on a collection. Probably not, because it's Disney. got 3 more here. The last Genesis game I beat this month was Toejam and Earl Panic on Funkatron. This is the sequel to Toejam and Earl, which was my friend had Toejam and Earl, so that's all I remember from it. But I wanted to play the sequel because it was more of a platformer, which I think I'd enjoy more. And I don't remember much about the first game. I remember you had to get parts of the ship. On this, you go back to the planet Funkatron, which Toejam and Earl. I think Toejam is the little guy here, and Earl's the big guy. So you go back to after the first game, you go back to Funkatron, but these Earthlings have stowed a ride on your spaceship, so they're causing trouble in Funkatron. So you have to go through, and it's a hide and seek game where you got to shake trees, look under stuff to find Earthlings, and once you find them, you throw jars at them to catch them, and then you go to the end, find the end of the level, and you throw all the Earthlings like a sack, and you send them back to Earth. And you do that for about 9 levels, and the thing is, each Earthling is different to catch, so they each have different enemies. You have to really learn their tells and the best way to deal with them, because certain ones can really drain your health and kill you very quickly. You get special moves. There's a panic one where you hit. It takes if you have a 6-button controller, the top buttons use all your special moves. Otherwise, you have to hit start, and then it pauses, and then you go to a menu and you activate it there. So it's a good game to play with the 6-button controller. You have a panic move where you'll run around just invincible and throwing jars all around, and you have a one that you turn out this big machines that sucks all the Earthlings in from around you. So if you get in there's a ton of them around you, you hit that and it'll take care of them. And then you have like this funk vision where it'll show hidden objects like in this crayon kind of funky 90s look, and it'll highlight where in the world they are, and you have to correspond that to it just kind of switches styles of the map, and it shows you, okay, up here something's sparkling, you know to jump there to get it. Very challenging game. I should say there's 17 levels, and you get a password after 5 levels. So I think unlike the first game you got to beat in one shot. This, as long as you get past 5 levels, you can take a password and take a break. I really like this game, and it kind of makes me want to play the first one, which I remember not being too thrilled of. I didn't understand it, but I kind of want to play the first one and see where these guys came from. Next up, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. I beat Legend of the Mystical Ninja on Super Nintendo this year, and I really liked that. It's based on a character, Goemon, in Japan, who was like a Robin Hood figure, more popular in Japan. And the one for Super Nintendo, I think I rented it as a kid, and I had it for a while, and I finally beat it this year. This is a 3D interpretation of that, so it's before Zelda 64, or Ocarina, I called it Zelda 64, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, perfected 3D battles. So the combat is very basic. There's no lock-on. You have to kind of hit in a direction. There's no camera controls. You got to kind of wait for the camera to rotate. That's the bad things about it. Everything else I really like. The music is outstanding. There's like a animated, Japanese anime, music video at the beginning, which is just, it's like, if you look it up on YouTube, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, opening intro, it's fantastic. The music is great. The graphics are cool. Basically, it's kind of like a 3D world, nothing huge or anything like Mario 64. And there's different palaces you go to, and the palaces have a map like in Zelda, and there's different items you get in the palace. And then you eventually get different spells and stuff you can use. I don't think you only play as Goemon in this game, I believe. So you don't play as his other characters like he had in the Super Nintendo. There was Dr. Yang, which I forget. I think his name is Urabasu or something in the Japanese version. He's in this game. I can't remember, and I just beat it this year. But yeah, not this year, but this month, I should say. It's fun. Kind of pricey though. I don't think it's worth for what it goes for You can get it for 20 bucks probably, but I think it goes for like 40 or 50 now. I don't think it's worth that, but it's a fun game. You can emulate it and see if you like it. Nothing too long. Oh, there's giant battles. You get into these big like mechs, and you have to fight other robots, and that's really fun. So it's kind of different in that regard. Um, so yeah, it's fun to explore and just play through. The follow-up to that game was Goemon's Great Adventure, and this is a side-scroller. This plays a lot more like the Super Nintendo one, but it's 2.5D polygonal, not pixel. So you can play as other characters in this one. You play as Urabasu, which is this character right here, and you play as this girl and then a little robot ninja. And it has like a world map, like a platformer, like Donkey Kong Country or something. And you go into towns like on the Super Nintendo one. And in those towns, you have to get passes from people, and you get passes from finishing a level. And if you get enough passes, you can open up more levels, much like a modern platformer. Not a 3D game, but a 2.5D more. It feels like the Super Nintendo one, only in kind of a more modern, at the time, take of it. And they improve the robot battles in this one a lot. You have like another robot that follows you around because she likes you, and you can pass a baton to her, and she'll take on like the fighting. So if you're low on health with that one, during a boss battle, you can pass the baton, and if you time it right, she'll grab it, and you'll be okay. You can and it's the only way to avoid some of their moves, too. So it's very useful. And it's a fun game too. Out of these two, I think I like them both. If I had to choose which one to play, I would say this one, because I haven't played as many 3D platformers as I have 2D. If you want to play a 3D platformer, get this one. 2D platformer, play this one. But they're both good. And yeah, that's everything I beat for March of this year. So I hope you're doing great. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions about these games, or what games maybe you recommend I should play, or whatever. And I hope you're doing great, and have a great rest of your day and month.